For 9 years, I renewed every contract that kept your father's $2 billion logistics empire running. Now, you're firing me for missing your birthday. I shouted at Tyler Whitman across the mahogany conference table. He smirked and leaned back in his leather chair. Effective immediately, he said coldly. Badge, now. My hands trembled as I unclipped my security badge and slid it across the polished surface. You have 15 minutes before every single contract I manage expires automatically. Good luck explaining to your father why his empire just collapsed. I walked toward the door as Tyler's smug expression melted into pure terror. 9 years earlier, I walked through the glass doors of Whitman Logistics for the first time, clutching my resume and wearing my best interview suit. The building stretched 20 floors into the Seattle skyline, its windows reflecting the bustling port below, where massive cargo ships lined the docks like sleeping giants. Harold Whitman himself had interviewed me for the junior contracts coordinator position, and his genuine smile put me at ease immediately. Ericka, he said, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. This company handles logistics for some of America's biggest manufacturers. We move everything from automotive parts to medical supplies across 48 states. Think you can handle keeping track of all our vendor relationships? I nodded eagerly. At 26, I was determined to prove myself in the corporate world. Harold's company fascinated me because it was the invisible backbone that kept American commerce flowing. Every truck that rolled down the interstate, every warehouse that processed orders, every delivery that reached its destination on time depended on the intricate web of contracts and relationships that Harold had built over 30 years. My first week, I noticed the contract management system was a disaster. Files scattered across multiple databases, renewal dates tracked on sticky notes, and vendor communications buried in endless email chains. Some agreements hadn't been properly reviewed in years. I stayed late every night, methodically organizing everything into a comprehensive digital system. Most people would have given up after seeing this mess, Harold commented one evening, finding me still at my desk at 8 o'clock. But you're different, aren't you? He was right. I approached each contract like solving a puzzle, understanding not just the legal terms, but the relationships behind them. I learned that Janet at Pacific Freight preferred calls on Tuesday mornings, that Doug at Mountain Transport needed detailed shipping manifests 48 hours in advance, and that Sarah at Coastal Distribution could expedite urgent orders if you remembered to ask about her grandson's baseball games. Within 6 months, I had revolutionized their entire contract renewal process. I created automated alert systems that flagged upcoming expirations, built personal relationships with every key vendor, and established protocols that prevented any agreement from slipping through the cracks. Harold promoted me to senior contracts manager, and my salary doubled. The work excited me because I could see the direct impact of my efforts. When I successfully renegotiated terms with Transglobal Shipping, we saved the company $400,000 annually while improving delivery times. When I resolved a dispute between two competing freight companies, it prevented a work stoppage that could have disrupted supply chains across the Pacific Northwest. I wasn't just managing paperwork. I was keeping American business moving. Harold treated me like family. He remembered my birthday, asked about my mother's health, and included me in strategic planning meetings usually reserved for senior executives. You understand this business better than people who have been here twice as long, he told me during my 3rd annual review. I trust you with the most critical relationships we have. That trust meant everything to me. Harold had built Whitman Logistics from a single truck to a $2 billion empire through handshake deals and personal integrity. Clients stayed with us for decades because they knew Harold's word was absolute. I was determined to uphold that legacy. 3 years ago, Harold introduced me to his son Tyler, who was joining the company as regional operations manager. Tyler was 27, the same age as me, with perfectly styled blonde hair and an expensive suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. His handshake was weak, and his smile never reached his eyes. Tyler graduated from Stanford Business School, Harold explained proudly. He's going to help us expand into new markets. From the beginning, Tyler treated me with barely concealed disdain. He questioned my methods, second-guessed my decisions, and often went around me to contact vendors directly. His approach was aggressive and transactional, focused on squeezing every penny from relationships I had carefully cultivated over years. I watched him make costly mistakes that could have been avoided with basic preparation. He once promised a client delivery schedules that were physically impossible, forcing me to work weekends coordinating with multiple freight companies to prevent a complete disaster. Another time, he nearly lost a major account by demanding payment terms that violated industry standards. Each time Tyler stumbled, I quietly fixed the problems to protect Harold's reputation. I covered for Tyler's errors in reports, smoothed over vendor relationships. He had strained and absorbed the extra work without complaint. Harold was so busy managing the broader company that he didn't see the chaos Tyler was creating on the operational level. I justified my silence by telling myself that Tyler would learn from experience. Harold loved his son deeply, and I didn't want to damage that relationship. Besides, the company was thriving. Our revenue hit record highs, client satisfaction scores remained excellent, and our contract renewal rate stayed above 95%. Whatever Tyler's flaws, they weren't affecting our bottom line because I was ensuring the fundamental systems continued working flawlessly. But I should have paid closer attention to the pattern emerging. Tyler wasn't just incompetent, he was actively undermining the relationships and systems I had built. He resented my influence with vendors and clients, my access to Harold, and my reputation within the company. Most dangerously, he was learning to manipulate the very contract management system I had created. By his second year, Tyler had figured out how to process vendor agreements without my direct oversight, claiming he needed autonomy to develop his leadership skills. I trusted the automated systems I had built to catch any problems, not realizing that Tyler was creating agreements with fictional vendors, routing payments to accounts he controlled, and using my meticulous documentation processes to hide his theft. The signs were there, but I was too focused on my legitimate responsibilities to notice the criminal activity happening right under my nose. Tyler was stealing from his own father's company, and I was unwittingly providing the perfect cover by maintaining such detailed, well-organized records that a few fraudulent contracts could easily disappear among the thousands of legitimate ones. Harold trusted us both completely. Tyler was his son and heir apparent, while I was the dedicated employee who had never let him down. Neither of us would ever betray him. That faith made him blind to what was actually happening, and I was too naive to imagine the depths of Tyler's deception until it was almost too late. The invitation arrived on my desk on a Monday morning in October, printed on expensive cardstock with gold lettering. Tyler Whitman cordially requested my attendance at his 30th birthday celebration, scheduled for Friday afternoon from 2 to 6 o'clock at the Harbor View Ballroom downtown. At the bottom, in bold red text, attendance is mandatory for all management-level employees. I stared at the invitation in disbelief. Friday afternoon was when we conducted our quarterly client review meetings, the most important day in our business calendar. Major clients flew in from across the country to discuss contract renewals, expansion opportunities, and strategic partnerships. I had been preparing for months, coordinating schedules with executives from 12 different companies, representing nearly $600 million in annual revenue. I knocked on Tyler's office door and found him leaning back in his chair, feet propped on his desk, scrolling through his phone. "About this party," I began, holding up the invitation. "I have the quarterly reviews scheduled for Friday. Can we move the celebration to Saturday evening instead?" Tyler didn't look up from his phone. "The ballroom is booked," Party stays as scheduled. But Tyler, this is the biggest client meeting of the year. TransGlobal alone is reviewing $800 million in potential new business. I can't reschedule 12 major corporations because of a birthday party. Finally, he set down his phone and fixed me with a cold stare. Ericka, let me make something clear. I'm the regional operations manager and you report to me. When I say attendance is mandatory, that's exactly what I mean. Your little client meetings can wait. My chest tightened with frustration. These aren't little client meetings, Tyler. This is how we maintain the relationships that keep this company running. If I'm not there to present our renewal proposals and answer technical questions, we could lose accounts we've had for years. Then I guess you better figure out how to be in two places at once, Tyler replied with a smirk. Or maybe you better decide what's more important to your career here. I left his office feeling sick. The threat was clear: attend his party or face consequences. But I couldn't abandon responsibilities that affected hundreds of millions in revenue for what was essentially a social gathering during business hours. I spent the next 3 days trying to find a compromise, reaching out to clients to see if any meetings could be moved to Thursday or Monday. Unfortunately, the schedules of 12 major corporations couldn't be reshuffled on a few days' notice. Thursday evening, I was finalizing presentation materials at my apartment when my phone rang. My mother's voice was weak and shaky. "Ericka, honey, I'm at the hospital. I had some chest pains and the doctors want to run more tests. Can you come?" My heart stopped. My mother lived alone, and at 68, any cardiac symptoms were serious. I grabbed my keys and raced to Providence Medical Center, my mind spinning with worst-case scenarios. The emergency room doctor explained that my mother had experienced irregular heart rhythms and would need to stay overnight for monitoring and additional tests scheduled for the next morning. "I'm scared," my mother whispered, gripping my hand as nurses attached monitoring equipment. "What if something's really wrong?" I held her hand tightly, fighting back tears. "I'm not going anywhere, Mom. I'll be right here with you." Sitting in that sterile hospital room, listening to the steady beep of heart monitors, Tyler's birthday party seemed utterly insignificant. My mother had sacrificed everything to raise me alone after my father left when I was 12. She worked double shifts as a nursing assistant to pay for my college education, never complaining about the financial strain or asking for anything in return. Now she needed me, and there was no question about where I belonged. At midnight, I sent Tyler a detailed email explaining the medical emergency and my absence from his party. I copied Harold Janet from Human Resources and my entire team. I outlined contingency plans for the client meetings, provided backup contacts for each account, and attached all necessary presentation materials. Even under these circumstances, I made sure the company's interests were protected. Friday morning brought encouraging news. My mother's tests showed no permanent heart damage, but her cardiologist recommended she stay another day for observation. I spent the morning coordinating with my team remotely, ensuring the client meetings proceeded smoothly despite my absence. Sarah, my assistant, kept me updated throughout the day. "The TransGlobal meeting went well," she texted at 3 o'clock. "Amanda handled the presentation perfectly. They're ready to sign the expanded agreement." "How's Tyler's party?" I replied. "Awkward. Only about half the invited people showed up. The executives from Pacific Freight looked confused about why they were at a birthday party during business hours. Tyler keeps checking his phone and looks annoyed." I felt a twinge of guilt, but reminded myself that I had made the right choice. My mother's health crisis had resolved positively, and the client meetings were successful without me. Everyone would understand that family emergencies take precedence over social obligations. I was wrong. Monday morning, I arrived at the office to find a termination letter on my desk. According to the document, I was being dismissed immediately for insubordination, failure to follow direct orders, and abandonment of essential duties. Tyler had scheduled a meeting for 9 o'clock to discuss my transition out of the company. I sat in the conference room stunned by the coldness of Tyler's demeanor. He spoke as if reading from a script outlining my supposed failures and character flaws. According to him, my absence from his party demonstrated a pattern of disrespectful behavior and poor judgment that made me unsuitable for a management position. "This decision is final," he concluded. "Security will escort you to your office to collect personal belongings. You have 30 minutes. That's when I exploded. 9 years of dedication, countless late nights, millions in saved revenue relationships built through genuine care and attention to detail, all dismissed because I chose my mother's hospital bedside over a vanity party. The injustice burned through my shock and unleashed words I had been holding back for years. But as Tyler's smug expression crumbled into terror when I mentioned the automatic contract expirations, I realized something that chilled me to the bone. He hadn't just impulsively fired me out of wounded pride. The timing was deliberate. Tyler had scheduled his party to conflict with the client meetings, hoping to create a situation where I would look irresponsible or incompetent. When I chose my family emergency instead, he saw an opportunity to eliminate me entirely. The question was, why Tyler wanted me gone so desperately. As I walked out of that conference room, leaving him pale and panicked, I began to understand that my firing had nothing to do with a birthday party and everything to do with something much more sinister that Tyler couldn't afford for me to discover. Walking through the lobby of Whitman Logistics with a security guard at my elbow felt like a nightmare. Colleagues I had worked with for nearly a decade avoided eye contact or stared in shock as I was escorted to the elevator. My hands trembled as I packed 9 years of professional life into cardboard boxes, while the security guard watched every movement. Sarah, my assistant, lingered in the doorway with tears in her eyes. "This is insane, Ericka. Everyone knows you're the backbone of this company. How can Tyler just throw you away like this?" I hugged her tightly, whispering in her ear, "Keep your head down and stay out of Tyler's way. And Sarah, if anything strange happens with the contracts or vendor relationships, you have my personal number." The security guard cleared his throat impatiently. "Time's up, ma'am." I took one last look at my office, with its wall of industry awards photos with Herald and key clients, and the whiteboard covered in renewal deadlines and project timelines. 9 years of building something meaningful gone in 30 minutes. The elevator ride down felt endless. In the lobby, I could see Tyler through the glass walls of the conference room frantically typing on his laptop while speaking rapidly into his phone. Even from a distance, his agitation was obvious. The reality of what he had done was sinking in. My phone started buzzing before I reached my car. The first call was from Janet at Pacific Freight. "Ericka, thank God I reached you. I got this bizarre email from Tyler Whitman about restructuring our shipping agreement. He's demanding we switch to some new vendor I've never heard of with rates 30% higher than our current contract. What's going on over there?" I sat in my car engine running, trying to process the implications. "Janet, as of 1 hour ago, I no longer work for Whitman Logistics. I can't advise you on company business, but I can say that any major changes to your agreement should go through Herald directly. You don't work there anymore, Ericka. You are that company's contracts department. This makes no sense." 3 more calls came in rapid succession. Doug from Mountain Transport was confused about a cancellation notice he had received for their ongoing freight relationship. Amanda from Coastal Distribution had questions about new insurance requirements that Tyler was trying to impose. Rick from Portland Shipping wanted to know why someone named Tyler was demanding access to confidential rate information they had only ever shared with me. Each conversation painted the same picture. Tyler was scrambling to take over. Vendor relationships he didn't understand, making demands that violated long-standing agreements and creating confusion throughout our entire network. My personal phone rang again. This time it was Sarah calling from her cell phone. "Ericka, you need to know what's happening here. Tyler is losing his mind. He's been calling vendors all morning, but half of them won't talk to him because they don't recognize his name. He's demanding access to your encrypted files, but Doug in IT says he can't provide that without Harold's direct authorization." "What's Tyler saying about the access issues?" "He's claiming you deliberately locked him out of essential systems as sabotage. He's talking about having you arrested for corporate espionage." But Ericka, here's the thing that's really weird. He's not just trying to access your current files. He's specifically asking for records from 18 months ago, right around the time those new vendor partnerships were established. A cold realization washed over me. 18 months ago was when Tyler had started insisting on more autonomy in vendor management. I had trusted him to handle smaller contracts while I focused on major accounts, never thinking to audit his work closely. If he was now desperate to access those specific files, it meant there was something in that time period he needed to hide or control. "Sarah, I need you to do something for me, but only if it's safe. Can you check the vendor database for any companies that were added during that period that you don't recognize, names that don't match our usual regional freight partners?" "I can try, but Ericka, Tyler is demanding a department meeting in 10 minutes. He says he's going to explain the transition plan for handling your responsibilities." After Sarah hung up, I sat in the parking garage trying to understand what was happening. Tyler hadn't just fired me impulsively. This was part of a larger plan. But what was he trying to accomplish? And why was he so desperate to control vendor records from 18 months ago? My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Ms. Peterson, this is Doug from IT. Can't talk now, but Tyler is demanding admin access to your systems. Harold is traveling, so Tyler is claiming authority as acting manager. Thought you should know." The pieces were starting to form a terrifying picture. Tyler was using my termination as cover for something bigger. He needed unrestricted access to the contract management systems I had built, specifically the historical records from when he had started taking more control over vendor relationships. I started my car and drove home, my mind racing with possibilities. If Tyler was hiding something in those old vendor records, and if he was now panicking about exposure, then my firing wasn't just personal retaliation. I was a threat to something illegal he had been doing, and he had eliminated me before I could discover the truth. But Tyler had made a critical miscalculation. In his desperation to get rid of me, he had forgotten that I didn't just manage the contract systems, I had built them from the ground up. Every security protocol, every access level, every automated process had been designed by me to protect Whitman Logistics from exactly this kind of manipulation. The automated contract expiration warnings I had mentioned weren't a bluff. I had programmed fail-safes into the system that required specific authorization codes to prevent agreements from defaulting to cancellation status. Tyler could demand access to my files, but without understanding the underlying architecture of the systems he would be navigating, blind through relationships and agreements he had never bothered to learn. By evening, my phone had received dozens of calls and messages from vendors, clients, and concerned colleagues. The consensus was clear. Whitman Logistics was in chaos. Tyler was making increasingly desperate decisions, and nobody understood how a company could fire the person responsible for maintaining $2 billion in business relationships. But the most telling message came from Sarah just before midnight. "Tyler worked until 11 tonight trying to figure out your systems. He kept saying something about having 72 hours to fix everything before Harold gets back from his business trip. He looked terrified, Ericka. Whatever you did when you left, it's working." 72 hours. Tyler knew something specific was going to happen in 72 hours that would expose whatever he had been hiding. And apparently, I was the only person who could prevent it. For the first time since being escorted out of the building, I smiled. Tyler thought he had checkmated me by destroying my career, but he had actually trapped himself. He needed my expertise to cover up his crimes, but he had just eliminated any reason I might have to help him. The game was far from over. Thursday morning found me sitting beside my mother's hospital bed, watching her sleep peacefully as morning sunlight filtered through the windows. Her color had improved overnight, and the cardiac monitor showed a steady, normal rhythm. The medical crisis that had triggered this entire catastrophe was resolving, but the professional storm I had walked into was just beginning. "You look tired, sweetheart," my mother said, opening her eyes and squeezing my hand. "Have you been here all night?" "Just thinking through some work issues, Mom. How are you feeling?" She struggled to sit up, and I adjusted her pillows. At 68, my mother remained sharp and perceptive, despite her health scare. Work issues or work disasters. You have that same expression you had in high school when you were solving calculus problems that stumped your teachers. I couldn't help but smile. My mother knew me too well. "It's complicated, Mom. Remember that company I've been working for yesterday? They fired me for choosing to be here with you instead of attending a party." Her face flushed with anger. "They fired you for taking care of family. After 9 years of dedicated service, Ericka, that's not just wrong, it's evil." Before I could respond, my phone rang. The caller ID showed Harold Whitman's direct number. "Ericka, I just landed in Chicago and got the most disturbing voicemail from Tyler. He says you've sabotaged our computer systems and that vendors are threatening to cancel their contracts. I need you to explain what's happening." My mother squeezed my hand supportively as I chose my words carefully. "Harold Tyler fired me yesterday morning for missing his birthday party. I was here at the hospital with my mother during her cardiac emergency. As for the contract issues, I warned Tyler that the renewal systems require specific authorization protocols that only I understand." "He fired you for a family emergency?" Harold's voice carried genuine shock. "Ericka, that's not the company culture I've built. Family always comes first. Always." "Harold, there's more going on here than Tyler has told you. I think you need to come home immediately and review what's been happening in the contracts department. I'm changing my flight plans now. Don't go anywhere until I can sort this out." After Harold hung up, I felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. Harold's reaction confirmed that my firing had been Tyler's personal decision, not company policy. But it also meant Tyler was now lying to his father about the reasons behind the corporate chaos. My phone buzzed with another call, this one from Transglobal Shipping. I recognized the number as their executive offices in California. "Ms. Peterson, this is Robert Crawford, Senior Vice President at Transglobal. I apologize for calling directly, but we have a serious situation developing. Someone named Tyler Whitman contacted our procurement department yesterday with a proposal to restructure our shipping agreement. He's demanding we switch to a new logistics provider that would increase our costs by 40% while reducing service guarantees." I felt my blood pressure rising. "Mr. Crawford, I was terminated from Whitman Logistics yesterday, so I can't speak for current company policy. But I can tell you that any legitimate changes to your agreement should come through Harold Whitman personally and should be designed to improve your service while maintaining competitive pricing." That's what I suspected. Ms. Peterson, Transglobal has worked with Whitman Logistics for 12 years, specifically because of the professional relationship we've had with you. Your attention to detail and understanding of our complex shipping requirements has saved us millions in logistics costs. If you're no longer with the company, we're going to have to reconsider our entire partnership. Mr. Crawford, you represent $400 million in annual business for Whitman Logistics. I think Harold Whitman would want to discuss this situation with you personally before you make any decisions. After that conversation, I understood the full magnitude of what Tyler had unleashed. He hadn't just fired an employee. He had severed the personal relationships that held together a $2 billion business network. Clients like Transglobal didn't just work with Whitman Logistics. They worked with me specifically, trusting my expertise and reliability to coordinate their complex shipping needs. My mother had been listening to my phone conversations with growing interest. "Ericka, it sounds like this Tyler person didn't just make a mistake. It sounds like he deliberately destroyed something valuable." She was right. The timing of everything was too convenient to be coincidental. Tyler had scheduled his party to conflict with major client meetings, fired me when I chose family over attendance, and then immediately started trying to restructure vendor agreements in ways that made no business sense. Doug from IT called around noon, speaking quietly and quickly. "Ericka, I can't talk long, but you need to know what Tyler has been doing. He's been trying to delete vendor records from 18 months ago, but the system won't let him remove anything without administrative approval. He's also been attempting to create new vendor profiles with fake company information." Fake company information. Yeah, businesses that don't exist when I run background checks. But here's the strange part: these fake companies have been receiving payments for the past year and a half. Substantial payments, like $20,000 to $30,000 monthly for services that aren't documented anywhere. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. Tyler hadn't been incompetent. He had been criminal. He had created fictitious vendors, processed fake contracts through my meticulously organized system, and been stealing money from his father's company for over a year. My detailed record-keeping had provided perfect cover for his embezzlement scheme, and my professional reputation had prevented anyone from questioning the vendor relationships he was managing. "Doug, can you trace where those payments have been going?" "I'm working on it, but Tyler is pressuring it to give him administrative access so he can fix the security issues you supposedly created. If he gets admin rights, he could delete all the evidence." After Doug hung up, I sat in that hospital room feeling nauseated by the realization of how thoroughly I had been manipulated. Tyler had been using my professional competence to hide his theft, counting on my loyalty to Harold to prevent me from questioning his vendor management activities. When I became a liability rather than an asset, he had eliminated me using the first available excuse. But Tyler had miscalculated the consequences of his actions. By firing me so abruptly, he had created a crisis that was drawing attention to exactly the vendor relationships he needed to keep hidden. Major clients were asking questions, vendors were confused about sudden changes, and Harold was rushing home to investigate the chaos. My mother reached over and took my hand. "Sweetheart, this young man has made a serious mistake. He's hurt you personally and professionally, but from what I'm hearing, he's also put himself in a very dangerous position." "What do you mean?" "He's stolen from his own father, used your good work to hide his crimes, and then destroyed the very relationships that could have protected him. That's not strategy, that's desperation. And desperate people make increasingly bad decisions until they destroy themselves." Looking at my mother weak from her cardiac episode, but still sharp as ever, I realized she was absolutely right. Tyler wasn't winning. He was panicking. And panic would lead him to make the kinds of mistakes that would expose everything he had been trying to hide. I just needed to be patient and let his desperation work against him, while I gathered the evidence to protect both Harold's company and my own reputation. The awakening wasn't just mine. It was Tyler's realization that he had trapped himself in a situation he couldn't control. Friday morning brought the first public indication that Whitman Logistics was in serious trouble. The Seattle Business Journal's online edition featured a headline that made my coffee go cold: "Management Crisis Rocks Major Logistics Firm as Key Contracts Face Cancellation." The article was brief but damaging reporting that multiple vendors and clients had complained about sudden changes to long-standing agreements and the abrupt departure of a senior manager responsible for maintaining critical business relationships. While the company wasn't named directly, anyone in the logistics industry would recognize the description of Harold's empire. My phone rang at 7:30 with a call from Amanda at Coastal Distribution. Her voice was tight with frustration. Ericka, I'm calling because I don't know what else to do. Yesterday afternoon, Tyler Whitman showed up at our offices unannounced, demanding to inspect our facilities and review our equipment certifications. When I explained that our agreement doesn't require facility inspections, he became hostile and threatening. Threatening how? He said that if we didn't cooperate with his new requirements, Whitman Logistics would find vendors who were more willing to follow orders. Then he demanded access to our financial records to verify our insurance coverage, even though we've been using the same insurance provider for 8 years without any problems. I felt my anger building. Tyler was destroying relationships I had spent years cultivating through trust and mutual respect. Amanda, has Harold contacted you directly about any of these changes? That's the thing, Ericka. When I called the main office to speak with Harold about Tyler's behavior, his assistant said he was traveling overseas and wouldn't be back until next week. But Tyler claimed he was acting on Harold's direct orders. Harold was flying back today, not next week. Tyler was lying to vendors about Harold's travel schedule to prevent them from appealing his increasingly erratic decisions. He was buying himself time to either cover his tracks or cause enough damage to the vendor relationships that the entire business would collapse before his embezzlement could be discovered. Sarah called an hour later, her voice barely above a whisper. Ericka, something terrible is happening here. 3 major suppliers have suspended shipments because Tyler hasn't signed renewal documents that were due Wednesday. He keeps saying he's waiting for approval from corporate, but these are routine extensions that should have been automatic. Which suppliers? Western Freight, Rocky Mountain Transport, and Pacific Container Services. Together, they handle about 60% of our West Coast shipping volume. If those shipments don't restart by Monday, we'll have empty warehouses and angry clients throughout California, Oregon, and Washington. The magnitude of Tyler's incompetence was staggering. He was single-handedly dismantling the logistics network that supported hundreds of businesses across the western United States. Sarah, what's Tyler's explanation for not signing the renewals? He says he's reviewing all vendor relationships for efficiency improvements. But Ericka, he's been asking strange questions about payment methods and whether there are any vendors that receive wire transfers instead of standard checks. Wire transfers. Tyler was trying to identify which vendor payments were legitimate versus the fake companies he had created to steal money. He was so panicked about exposure that he couldn't distinguish between real business relationships and his criminal activity. The morning news brought worse developments. Channel 7's business reporter mentioned that Whitman Logistics stock had dropped 12% in early trading due to rumors about operational difficulties. Social media posts from trucking industry workers were spreading stories about shipment delays and contract cancellations. Janet from Pacific Freight called during lunch with the most disturbing update yet. Ericka, I need to tell you what happened yesterday evening. Tyler Whitman called me at home, which was inappropriate enough, but he was clearly intoxicated. He started rambling about how ungrateful vendors were being and how he was going to show everyone who really controlled the shipping industry. Did he make any specific threats or? He said that any vendor who questioned his authority would be blacklisted from working with Whitman Logistics or any company in their network. Then he said something really strange about how certain people had been stealing credit for his work and that he was going to prove who the real professionals were. Tyler was becoming unhinged. The pressure of maintaining his deception while managing a crisis he didn't understand was breaking down his judgment and self-control. But his escalating recklessness was also creating opportunities for me to gather evidence of his criminal behavior. That afternoon, Doug from IT sent me a text message that changed everything. Found the bank account information for those fake vendor payments. All wire transfers go to an account registered to something called Whitman Holdings, LLC. But here's the interesting part. Tyler registered that company 18 months ago, using his personal address as the business location. Whitman Holdings, LLC. Tyler had been so brazen in his theft that he had used his own family name for the shell company receiving stolen money. He had embezzled hundreds of thousands of dollars from his father's business while hiding behind the legitimate vendor relationships I had been maintaining. But the evidence Doug had uncovered would be meaningless if Tyler gained administrative access to the computer systems and deleted the financial records. I needed to act quickly to preserve the proof before Tyler could destroy it. My phone rang with Harold's number. "Ericka, I just landed at SeaTac Airport, and my phone has been ringing constantly with calls from vendors and clients. I'm hearing reports that Tyler has been making unauthorized changes to agreements and threatening long-standing business partners. I need you to meet me at the office immediately." "Harold, before I come in, you need to know that Tyler has been lying to vendors about your travel schedule and claiming to act on your authority for decisions that violate our standard business practices. I'm beginning to understand that Tyler's version of events doesn't match what I'm hearing from other sources. Ericka, I built this company on trust and reliability. If my son has damaged those relationships out of pride or poor judgment, I'll fix it personally." Harold still didn't understand the full scope of what Tyler had done. He was thinking about management mistakes and personality conflicts, not criminal theft and systematic deception. But I knew that when Harold reviewed the financial records Doug had discovered, he would realize that his son hadn't just made poor business decisions. He had betrayed everything Harold had spent 30 years building. The empire was cracking, and Tyler's desperation was accelerating the collapse. But now Harold was coming home, and the truth about Tyler's crimes was about to surface, whether Tyler was prepared for it or not. Saturday morning, I sat in my car outside the Whitman Logistics building, watching Harold's silver Mercedes pull into his reserved parking space. Through the lobby windows, I could see Tyler pacing frantically while speaking into his phone. He had spent the night at the office probably deleting files and trying to create cover stories for the crisis he had unleashed. Harold met me at the employee entrance, his face grim with exhaustion and frustration. At 65, he looked every year of his age with deep lines around his eyes and gray stubble that suggested he hadn't slept on the flight home. "Ericka, I've spent 12 hours on the phone with vendors, clients, and industry partners. The consensus is unanimous. Tyler has created a disaster that's threatening 30 years of relationship building. I need you to explain exactly what happened on Tuesday and help me understand how we fix this." I took a deep breath and chose my words carefully. Harold Tyler didn't just fire me impulsively. He scheduled his birthday party to conflict with major client meetings, demanded mandatory attendance, and then used my family emergency as justification to terminate me for insubordination. But that's not the worst part. Harold's expression darkened as we walked toward the elevator. "What else?" "Tyler has been creating fake vendor companies and stealing money from Whitman Logistics for at least 18 months. He's embezzled hundreds of thousands of dollars through wire transfers to shell companies he controls." Harold stopped walking and stared at me in disbelief. "That's an extremely serious accusation, Ericka. Are you certain?" Doug and ET discovered the financial records yesterday. All the evidence is in the contract management systems I built, unless Tyler has already deleted the files. We reached Harold's office to find Tyler waiting inside, disheveled and clearly agitated. When he saw me beside his father, his face went white. "Dad, what is she doing here? I told you she sabotaged our systems and violated her employment agreement. She's probably here to steal proprietary information." Harold closed the office door and gestured for both of us to sit down. "Tyler, I've spoken with dozens of vendors and clients over the past day. The picture they're painting doesn't match the story you told me. I need both of you to explain what actually happened, starting with Ericka." I outlined the timeline methodically. Tyler's party invitation conflicting with client meetings, my mother's medical emergency, my detailed handover of responsibilities, and Tyler's termination decision. I showed Harold the threatening emails Tyler had sent to vendors and the documentation of fake companies receiving payments. Tyler's denials became increasingly desperate as Harold reviewed the evidence. "She's lying, Dad. Ericka has been insubordinate for months, questioning my authority and undermining my decisions. When I tried to modernize our vendor relationships, she sabotaged the process because she couldn't handle losing control." Tyler explained Whitman Holdings LLC and the wire transfers to that account, Harold said quietly. "I don't know what you're talking about." I handed Harold the printouts Doug had provided. Whitman Holdings is registered to Tyler's personal address and has received over $400,000 in payments for non-existent services over the past year and a half. Harold studied the documents with growing horror. Bank statements, vendor agreements with fictional companies, and payment authorizations all bearing Tyler's electronic signature. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. "You stole from me," Harold whispered. "You stole from your own father's company while I trusted you with increasing responsibility." Tyler's composure finally cracked completely. "You don't understand the pressure I've been under. Everyone in this company worships Ericka like she's some kind of genius, but she's just a glorified secretary who got lucky with organizational skills. I have an MBA from Stanford. I should be running major accounts, not watching her get all the credit for work I could do better. So you decided to embezzle money to prove your worth. I was going to pay it back." The money was temporary loans to cover some personal investments that would have benefited the company long term. But Ericka's systems made it impossible to move money efficiently, so I had to work around her bureaucratic processes. Harold looked at his son with an expression of complete devastation. 30 years of building a business based on integrity and trust, destroyed by the person he had hoped would continue his legacy. "Tyler, you're terminated immediately. Security will escort you from the building, and our attorneys will be filing criminal charges for embezzlement and fraud. You're no longer my son's employee. You're a criminal who stole from my company." Tyler's face twisted with rage as he turned toward me. "This is all your fault. If you had just stayed in your place instead of acting like you owned this company, none of this would have happened. You destroyed my career because you couldn't handle being replaced by someone more qualified. Tyler, you destroyed your own career by stealing money and lying to everyone who trusted you," I replied calmly. "I just maintained the professional standards your father established." Security arrived to escort Tyler from the building as he shouted accusations and threats, watching him being led away in handcuffs. 20 minutes later, I felt no satisfaction, only sadness for Harold's pain and relief that the truth had finally emerged. Harold slumped in his chair, looking older than I had ever seen him. "Ericka, I owe you an apology that I can never adequately express. My son committed crimes against this company and personally attacked you for maintaining the integrity I taught you to value. How do I possibly make this right?" "Harold, the most important thing now is stabilizing the vendor relationships and client accounts Tyler damaged. We can rebuild trust, but we need to act quickly before more contracts are canceled." Over the next 6 hours, Harold and I worked together to contact every affected vendor and client. Harold personally apologized for Tyler's behavior and assured each partner that normal professional relationships would resume immediately. I provided technical details about contract renewals and helped coordinate shipping schedules that Tyler's incompetence had disrupted. By evening, we had prevented the complete collapse of Whitman Logistics' operational network. Most vendors agreed to resume normal business relationships, though several demanded additional safeguards against future management interference with established procedures. Harold offered me Tyler's former position as Vice President of Operations with a salary increase of 60% and equity participation in the company's long-term growth. But more importantly, he implemented new oversight procedures to prevent any single person from manipulating vendor relationships or financial systems without multiple layers of approval. The counterstrike had been successful, but the real victory wasn't in defeating Tyler's criminal scheme. It was in proving that integrity and professional competence would always triumph over entitlement and corruption, even when the stakes included personal relationships and family loyalty. 3 months later, I stood in the same conference room where Tyler had fired me, but this time I was presenting quarterly financial results to Whitman Logistics' board of directors. The numbers told a remarkable story of recovery and growth that exceeded everyone's expectations. Contract renewals are at 98%, the highest rate in company history, I reported to the assembled executives. Client satisfaction scores have improved across all service categories, and we've successfully negotiated expanded agreements worth an additional $200 million in annual revenue. Harold smiled from the head of the table, looking healthier and more confident than he had in years. The stress of Tyler's betrayal had aged him initially, but the company's renaissance had restored his enthusiasm for the business he had spent 3 decades building. The transformation had been remarkable. Once Tyler's criminal activities were exposed and prosecuted, vendors and clients rallied around Harold with renewed loyalty and respect. The business community understood that Harold himself had been victimized by his son's deception and admired how quickly he had acted to restore integrity to the company's operations. Tyler's criminal trial had concluded the previous week with convictions for embezzlement fraud and wire fraud. He received a sentence of 4 years in federal prison and was ordered to pay full restitution to Whitman Logistics. The judge specifically noted that Tyler's abuse of trust relationships made his crimes particularly serious, as they had threatened the livelihoods of hundreds of employees and business partners. More importantly for me, the trial had vindicated my professional reputation completely. Evidence presented in court showed that my contract management systems had actually prevented Tyler from stealing even more money, and that my detailed record-keeping had been essential to exposing his crimes. Several industry publications had featured stories about how proper operational controls could prevent insider fraud. But the personal satisfaction went far beyond professional vindication. My mother had made a full recovery from her cardiac episode and had been able to attend the company's annual awards dinner as my guest. Watching her beam with pride as Harold publicly recognized my contributions to saving the company had been worth more than any salary increase or title promotion. The real measure of success, however, was in the relationships I had been able to rebuild and strengthen. Janet from Pacific Freight had become one of our most vocal advocates, referring new clients to Whitman Logistics because of their confidence in our renewed commitment to professional excellence. Amanda from Coastal Distribution had expanded her partnership with us, trusting our stability for her company's growth plans. Most meaningfully, Doug from IT had been promoted to Chief Information Officer, and together we had designed new security protocols that prevented any single employee from manipulating financial systems without multiple layers of oversight. The painful lesson of Tyler's betrayal had made Whitman Logistics stronger and more secure than ever before. Harold had also implemented a new mentorship program for employees, ensuring that future managers would be developed through professional competence rather than family connections. Young professionals throughout the company now had clear advancement paths based on merit and contribution rather than personal relationships. Looking around the conference room at faces that represented vendors, clients, and colleagues who had supported me through the crisis, I realized that justice had been served in the most meaningful way possible. Tyler's crimes had been exposed and punished, but more importantly, the values of integrity, competence, and loyalty that Harold had built into his company culture had been reaffirmed and strengthened. The birthday party that had triggered this entire ordeal seemed like ancient history now. Tyler had thought he could destroy me for choosing family over his vanity, never realizing that his actions would expose the criminal behavior that destroyed his own future. His attempt to eliminate me had backfired completely, revealing that the relationships and systems I had built were far more resilient than his schemes. My mother often reminded me that everything happens for a reason, and perhaps she was right. Tyler's betrayal had been painful and frightening, but it had also proven that professional excellence and personal integrity would always prevail over entitlement and corruption. As I concluded the board presentation and received congratulations from directors who had once questioned whether the company could survive Tyler's damage, I reflected on the life lesson that had emerged from this experience. True power in business comes not from position or family connections, but from the trust you earn through consistent competence and genuine service to others. People who try to succeed through manipulation and deception may achieve short-term victories, but they inevitably create the conditions for their own downfall. Meanwhile, those who build relationships through reliability and integrity create networks of support that can withstand any crisis. Tyler had thought he was firing an employee who threatened his authority, but he had actually eliminated the person protecting him from exposure. In trying to destroy me, he had destroyed himself. The empire hadn't just been saved, it had been transformed into something stronger, more ethical, and more sustainable than ever before. And sometimes that kind of meaningful change requires the shock of almost losing everything to appreciate what truly matters. Have you ever experienced a situation where someone's attempt to harm you actually revealed their own wrongdoing and led to justice being served? I'd love to hear your thoughts on how integrity ultimately triumphs over corruption in your own experiences. Please like this story if it resonated with you. Subscribe for more stories about overcoming workplace injustice. Share this with anyone who's faced similar challenges, and comment below with your own stories of professional vindication. Thank you for listening to my journey from betrayal to triumph, and I hope it inspires you to trust that doing the right thing, even in the face of adversity, will always lead to the right outcome in the end.